Call the meeting to order. Begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all. Mr. Otter, can I call in the roll, please?
Mr. Thacker, Mr. Norris,
Here.
Ms. Thies, Ms. Weger, Ms. Wilson,
Here.
Mr. Thompson,
Here.
Mr. Loudermilk.
Here. Thank you, Mr. Auditor. Next up, have first reading by summary reference of proposed ordinances and resolutions. First, we have an additional appropriation request 2021-25, ROC 2021-043, additional appropriation prosecutor's office for trials and investigations. Next, we have a request for reallocation of existing appropriation 2021-16, ROC 2021-044, out of series transfer. VO County Auditor, reallocation of appropriation from COVID-19 expenses, CV relief to coronavirus relief payroll, Social Security, FICA, and PERF. Next, it is salary ordinance 2021-15, ROC 2021-045, VO County Sheriff. Next, we have, looks like, resolution of reallocation of existing appropriation 2021-17, ROC 2021-046, out of series transfer, VO County Council, reallocation of appropriation from payroll adjustments to professional services. Any comments, questions about that? First reading. Appears there are none. Open this time up for public comment. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at this time? There appears to be no one. Next, communications from elected officials, other officials, or agencies of the county. Would anyone like to speak at this time? There's no one in the audience who'd like to speak. Is there anyone from the council who'd like to speak at this time? I think now might be the appropriate time for me to speak on this. Last Friday morning, there was a meeting held with elected officials and department heads to discuss the employee compensation classification system. There's discussion about the shortfalls of our current system we have in place, and discussion about what the department heads and elected officials would like to see in a system that they could feel confident in. It was a well-attended meeting. I think there was just over 30 individuals that had showed up, if I remember correctly, department heads and elected officials, and there were 3 council members here for that. It was a meeting that was kind of an impromptu meeting that had been called a few days earlier, just to kind of get thoughts and feedback from the different departments within county government. I felt like it was a fairly productive meeting. After we had concluded, Kara Wright and I spoke in here along with Mike Morris, and Kara had recently sent out an email, last Friday had sent out an email to gauge interest from elected officials and department heads to be on a committee to discuss what they would like to see out of a program for employee classification and compensation, and kind of develop, I guess, a list of the things they viewed as shortfalls from the current system and what they'd like to see moving forward. So Kara has received names and feedback from different individuals, and I think in the near future a committee will be created to discuss these items and then move forward. And I think the ultimate goal is to try to determine what might be the best product for the employees moving forward. So, as I said, it was kind of an impromptu, short notice meeting. There were only 3 council members here because that was obviously is what is allowed by the open door law. But I'm willing to, discuss any concerns or thoughts you may have, and if there's anybody that was in attendance at that meeting last Friday, feel free to speak at this time as well. Any thoughts from council?
President Loudermilk, can I understand who was representing who was there from the council? So I'm aware.
Yes, it was myself, Councilman Thompson, Councilwoman Wilson. Okay. Moving on. Reports from committees. Annual Budget Committee.
We have prepared a budget that we will present to the full council for a vote next Tuesday. The proposed budget includes a 5% increase across the board for all employees. Elected officials have been placed on a sliding scale. That is a recommendation of the State Board of Accounts, and that is as is done in the majority of most of the counties. 94% of the counties, I believe, do it on a sliding scale. The scale was devised from comparing us with other counties our size and smaller, according to the 2021 Association of Indiana Counties Fact Book. Those counties were also used by Wagner, Irwin, and Shealy during the compensation study. A total of 4 positions were added to the general fund. There was 1 building security in the sheriff's budget, 1 assistant chief deputy / financial supervisor in the auditor's budget, 1 prosecutor and the deputy prosecutor in the prosecutor's budget, and 1 legal secretary in the prosecutor's budget. The sheriff's budget includes an increase in clothing allowance for 41 merit deputies from $1,650 to $2,150, and that will be an increased cost of $20,500. It also includes an increase in clothing allowance for 30 reserve deputies and 9 courthouse security individuals, and an ordinance control officer from $1,250 to $1,500. That's an increased cost of $10,000. The jail budget includes an increase in clothing allowance for 68 correctional officers from $1,250 to $1,500 at an increased cost of $17,000. Also included is an incentive stipend in the amount of $1,500 for each correctional officer, and that's a cost of $102,000. That was an effort on our part to attract jailers there. That's part of our concern about the federal lawsuit over the jail. We were running extremely short on jailers, and as soon as we get them in, they get trained and they go someplace else for a higher wage. The budget also includes purchase of a 15-passenger vehicle and a 12-passenger minivan, $55,682. That's transport of prisoners to and from court. Emergency management budget includes the purchase of a vehicle at $44,638. Juvenile court budget includes $23,000 in salaries for juvenile drug court, $400,000 from edit to reimburse the county general for area planning was removed. The Lit PSAP fund includes an incentive stipend in the amount of $1,500 for each dispatcher, of 26 dispatchers at a cost of $39,000. The health budget includes 1 truck and 1 SUV at $75,000. Park budget includes increasing the maintenance specialist number of hours from 1,950 to 1,950 from 1,820. Highway budget includes 4 seasonal part-time positions. $200,000 for demolition of houses was moved from edit to general fund. Lit public safety includes $552,449 for body cams. Do we want to go over this all these numbers or not? That would be a pretty good idea. How about, we've got a humongous packet here with
I don't know if,
maybe you
I
want
don't
to.
know, I mean, no. I think it would have been better to have received this before now.
At 4:07.
I mean, so, questions from council? So, do we have any documents that show what the total increase for the employee salaries look like at 3%, 4%, and 5%?
We do. Do we have those, Cheryl, do we have those at 3%, 4%, and 5%? I don't have those tonight. I can get those to you, and, I can get them to you later this evening. I mean, we considered those. We had all those in consideration.
No, that's just the base rate increases for 3, 3.5, 4, and 5, it looks like. No.
President Loudermilk,
Yes. Councilman
while we're looking this stuff up, what is this budget in overage compared to last year's budget, number-wise? Is there not a total at the bottom that all adds up without, I mean, I guess for everybody that's here in the audience, the total?
The 2022 budget summary. That page right there, now look on page 2 of that, right, set page 2, right there.
So in looking at the form that we are studying, it looks, just so people are aware, it looks like there's basically a column for the 2021 adopted budget, 2022 adopted budget, the difference in the total between the two, and then the percentage difference. Is that correct? And this is from, are these from, I'm looking through, are these including all funds, including general and everything? Yeah. And is this including, because I'm just kind of scanning, with the 5%? Correct. With the 5% and the sliding.
So the 2021 number is $71,032,398. Does that include the CARES funds that we got?
No, that's the total
Okay,
separate amount of
okay.
money.
We had something similar. So, to ask the auditor's office again, is this what would, or is this the information that would go into Gateway for the budget? Of that?
Gateway, the gateway is there. Mhm. It's these right here.
The green ones. So this is complete and there's not anything missing from it right now? Correct. Just to kind of talk, if I can, President Loudermilk.
Yes.
Just kind of my observations. It's been quite a process, you know, with myself being new, Councilman Thacker jumping right in, I think, like the day after he got sworn in, and going through the process. You know, it's, we spent a lot of time looking at it, you know, a lot of things learned along the way. Things, you know, I might look at differently next time, but also things that I was proud of. So in looking at it, you know, what I asked the council to consider if there's something specific we need to address, or then please let us know and we can take a look at it. Because I think the biggest thing we need to do with this, so many of us big is try to work together and learn and put forth, you know, what we need to do within the council and also as a county. Because again, it's learning process. I'm relying on a lot of people helping me out along in that process as well. And I was really impressed by our department heads and getting to learn from them.
President Loudermilk.
Yes.
As I'm flipping through this, I also see an overage estimate of $687,569 for the county council. I know there was discussion before, and just looking at this, the $500,000 for county council is still showing on the 2022 estimated budget is being taken away, which would give us an overage of $687,569. I know that was a discussion before. I don't know if that's something that we want to talk about today, or
Yeah, I think it's certainly something we can talk about today. If you want to have the time to have that discussion now, we can do that.
positives, the positives and negatives are in parentheses, so I was just going to look at each department and look at the negatives, which is the positives. Particularly obviously stood out. Almost 2 points. And basically, I asked that question because I'm new. I wasn't involved into this last year, so that 500,000 being there and then being gone and showing a negative of almost $750,000. Just wondering what all that is and what all we can do about it. Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, it's, for years, that 500,000 has been sitting in the council budget, and it's rarely, if ever, been used. So, if it's not used, or you're either, by putting it in there, you're sapping resources that could be used by other departments or employees, or else you're charging $500,000 more tax than you need to charge. So I think it's my view anyway, that it just doesn't need to be there unless you've got a specific intent for it.
So what has that been used for in the past 2-3 years? Is there somewhere that it shows what that's been used for? Or
Nothing.
when there's shortcomings, do we do appropriations and put that to other things?
Not until last month, I think, we moved 32,000 of it to cover some unemployment, but it's been there, I don't know how long they had that in there. I think probably, it started out, I think, as a placeholder to cover property tax cap, because the LGF didn't really give us a method to do that. And since property tax caps are now accounted for in the budget process, but that's just remained there. For the life of me, I don't know why.
Money that we had that we didn't use for anything. There was no point in having money, taxpayer money that we didn't utilize.
President Lattimore. Yes. I apologize for my tardiness, but on that subject matter, on that particular case, when we talked about that, on that $500,000 that Travis inquired about, my recollection is that we talked with the auditor and we took a recommendation from the auditor to move that to the general fund. Is that?
Well,
did
it
we
is
know?
in the general
Yeah,
fund, but
well, I mean,
not-
we accounted for it
Yeah.
there. And so the decrease of that was just made it, freed up the money to be available to be utilized.
Correct.
Mr. President, I did speak to a couple of bankers in the community who, to whom I speak when I need some financial guidance, and they said it's foolish of us to not, put money into the community when we have times like this. And he always says when hamburgers $5.99 a pound, don't leave money sitting around, but move it into the community and utilize it so that it will stimulate the economy. And so, that's kind of the advice that I took note of and passed along to the folks in the budget committee, to not just leave $500,000 laying around, not using it for anything except a placeholder. That seemed to be a little bit goofy.
If I could also, I'd like to, Councilman Marie made mention of us being new to this, and through this process, I was proud to see that we came within $485,086 of last year's budget, which we understand $500,000 or $500,000, over $500,000 is budgeted for the cameras for the sheriff's department, which we've been told there's a real strong chance that will be a grant and that will be refunded back to the council. We have to still budget like it's not going to be, but that is the hope. So with that being said, is our budget could be pretty well the same as the budget of 2021.
Which was the budget of the year before, by the way.
Another question as I'm flipping through here. The contractual services planning for 400,000 under the funded description, 1112 edit county portion, no department. What's that? Same packet. Yes.
And that was another thing, I think, that was precipitated by property tax caps. When we took that big hit in the beginning, tried to shift some general fund expenses elsewhere.
Okay, so it was taken out of area planning and put into edit, or the other way around?
In the beginning, we budgeted money in edit to reimburse the general fund for area planning expenses. And that was, helped cover some of the cap losses when that was a big problem.
So a couple questions I have. I'm looking at some of this information that's provided for the meeting. One is a document with the title 2022 Budget Summary. And then also looking at one that kind of has some similar totals and differences. It's labeled at the top draft. And it talks about levy funds and maximum working levies, estimated circuit breaker. So looking at the 2022 budget summary, when you look at the difference between total revenue and expenses, our expenses exceed our total revenue by $5.069 million. And I assume, it looks like there's just one number off on the draft sheet, which has the 2022 projected revenue to recommended appropriation, which that looks like it covers the county general reassessment, Coon Bridge, health, park rec, Coon Cap development, and courthouse bond. And it shows a similar difference between revenues and appropriations of 5.06 million. Are those numbers something that we should not have cause for concern with, that our expenses on here exceeding total revenue?
Generally, we're not going to spend everything you've got appropriated. And you can tell that because we've had, our cash balance has, in the general fund, for example, has been increasing to the point where I think we probably had a cash balance of, I think it was like 23 or $24 million at the end of last year, when we had projected in these budget forms that it would be in the 15 to 16 million range. And that's been climbing every year. So at this point, we're projecting that you'll be using some of that cash that's been built up over the years.
Does the second page of the budget I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
So you said you
And
expect...
this is from the levy funds. That other page includes everything.
Can I ask for a clarification on what you just said? Is the second page of this budget summary, is that where you're talking about the cash, like the cash balance from year to year? Like there's 2019, 2020, 2021?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cash balance of 2019 is 23.7,
So if you get on that,
24,
here,
and 28.
The 2022 budget summary was just something put together for you so you could see it all on one sheet, basically, from what you have on the other sheets. And what it did is real quick, this is based on your Form 4Bs from the budget and everything you've projected. So that is your projected cash balances at December 31st of 2021, your miscellaneous revenue expected for 2022. It's your property tax we expect, and that is property tax expected, that the circuit breakers already been taken out. For your total revenue and your expenses, and then you get your difference of what you're really, like you said, Council President, of what your revenues are to your expenses for the 1 year, for the 12-month period. And then I did make comments so that you would know that you're using some of your cash balance. And then there's your projected cash balances of December 31st, 2022. I just thought it was quick and easy for you to be able to at least see that. That's why I did it that way.
I was just questioning when he was saying that it was.
Well, and that's why I
increasing.
wanted to, that's your projected reserves as far as cash balances at the end of each year. So if you go to those other pages,
Then it
Councilwoman,
breaks it down.
if you look, that's exactly what the cash balances were. The expenditures, the budget appropriation, the total appropriation, which included any encumbrances or additionals, and what the remaining appropriation was for that year, and that was your percent of cash reserves for those years.
That's what I assumed it was, but I didn't want to assume. That's why, thank you.
I just wanted to give.
I was hoping you'd clarify it.
I just wanted to give you a history, so you could see, and it goes clear back to 17.
Yep.
And I did it for the levied funds only, just because I figured those were the most important at this point.
Okay.
The rest of them.
So if I'm interpreting this right, in this 2022 budget, if I've understood what has been said here, the difference is the 5.069 million. We're getting into our cash balance. The projected cash balance be 20.354 million. Is that correct? assuming we meet all those obligations, all those appropriations. All those, the expenses, is that correct?
Yeah.
So basically what we're doing what we do, the way things stand right now, is we eat up 20% of our cash reserve. Is that a fair statement?
You'd drop it from 25 million to 20, yeah. And you still have 41% of your projected revenue or projected expenses left.
So the largest one on here is, the largest difference between revenue and expenses is general fund at almost 4.2 million. What percentage, I mean, what makes up the biggest part of the general fund?
Salary,
I mean, what percentage do you think that is? Do you have any idea?
no, not right off the top of my head, but it's, salaries is the largest part of any of the funds.
Maybe the third or fourth document. It says account span, it says 2021 adopted. It's personal services makes up for 32 million of a total budget of 42.9.
I'm sorry, tell me again what it says at the top of the packet.
It has account span, 2021 adopted budget, 2022 adopted budget, difference 21 and 22, and difference percentage.
Okay.
And it has the general fund, it has personal services at $32,011,069, and the total budget is $42,926,443.
75%.
It's a little bit more than 75%, but.
May I ask a question of Mr. Bramble? In looking at the budgets, I know we did not address any of the CARES money or things like that. So, because we're still kind of getting information on how and where that can be used, is that correct?
That's a fair statement.
And so it's not in the budget, but again, just trying to figure out how things work. When we learn how that can work, could that fill some of the voids or some of the areas where we're putting the budget, or is that gonna be completely separate?
There are specific items that it can be spent on, and one of the more, I guess, the general item is there's some fairly complex calculations that you go through to determine what your revenue loss is due to COVID.
COVID,
And it can be used to replace any loss, plus I think a they'll give you like a projected 4% expected increase, and if you aren't getting that, you get.
That could be like camping.
It's the county as a whole. You take every source of revenue that you possibly have, and that's what figures into the from all fund.
So is that, again, to kind of clarify, is that something that will be something to support this budget, or are we talking, will that be a year down the road, or when will it come into play?
Soon, I hope.
Yeah,
But first step is put together the plan, what you're gonna use it for, and then you guys would appropriate it for whatever specific purposes are in that plan.
so if we had something in this budget that would have qualified under CARES, is that something we can reallocate, or is that a done deal?
Until we get you can, when we, first steps, put together the plan. If there's health department expenses in here that can be covered by the ARP Act,
Uh-huh,
we could move it to the ARP fund,
okay.
or.
That's kind of what I'm
or
thinking of,
whatever.
like the emergency vehicle and a couple of the other, some of the bigger, so I'm just kind of curious how that might work. So I know we don't know exactly what it can be used for yet, but to supplement too. Okay. We had some expenses like that. I just felt like we're tough calls, but also we're in some pretty desperate need.
Some of, they're like outdoor recreation, the rules have said since outdoor recreation parks took a lot of use during the COVID crisis, or the ongoing COVID crisis, that ARP money can be used to improve parks and recreation. So that things that we have in here for parks or that type of thing can be moved, emergency services probably.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Roads or anything like that,
No, they haven't, no, not infrastructure.
Not
That's,
infrastructure.
I haven't seen that in there yet.
yeah, I think the ARP guidelines are more strict of what you can use it for than the CARES Act, is that
Yeah.
right? That was a question, it didn't sound like it, but it was.
I think they were more defined. Care seemed like it was changing every week. So- But they've got a set of preliminary rules out.
For the ARP, yeah.
And Mr. Bramble, how much, do we have totals on how much we received on those areas?
For the ARP,
Uh-huh.
I think it was like 10.3 million we've got so far. And
10.3?
yeah, and then we're supposed to get that much next year.
Do you know when that would be dispersed, or when we should receive it?
I'm guessing probably about mid-year.
No, I'm good. I didn't know you were looking at,
No, I
sorry.
wasn't. I didn't want to block on you.
No, I'm good, sorry.
So there's obviously a lot of information here, and I think we're kind of bouncing around a little bit. I wanted to kind of maybe go through the highlights page a little bit. I think it's maybe a little bit easier.
Which
Maybe-
one are you showing highlights?
Very
One?
first page.
The very
Highlights.
first, okay.
Yeah, it actually has,
The yellow on it?
yeah, highlights.
Says
Yeah.
Highlighted highlights.
Maybe we can
Highlights is
just,
highlighted.
maybe we can just go section by section, if anybody has any questions about that, and then it's probably gonna get us into some of these other documents that we have. So we talked about what we had before us is the 5% increase across the board for all employees. Are we gonna be able to get something that shows maybe a 3 and a 4 also, what that looks like across the board, and what the 5% commitment looks like for everything?
Yeah.
Is that something we can get?
Yeah,
That'd be great.
And sliding scale.
And then
That's what this, is
I'm
that what
looking-
this is?
Because we have a single sheet here that says classification base rates, 2022 increase projection. And it shows a 3, 3.5, 4, and 5% hourly rate changes for each classification. And then if I'm reading this right, you go down about halfway down the page, and it has a section for elected officials, and then that would be what is being proposed for the sliding scale. Is that correct? Looks like there's maybe, is there 3 different proposals discussed as a budget committee for elected officials?
I think so.
And then there's also a final column here pertaining to elected officials that has certification, board member, licensed physician. There's some figures there. Is that essentially a pay for required certifications for that elected position? Is that what we're looking at?
The single page that says application-based rate.
I was hoping the people on the budget committee would know, but
I'm looking at the wrong one, sorry.
Ask that question again, please.
okay. Okay. For being on the, yeah, for the, being on the board by the virtue of the office, is that right? Okay.
Those things.
Okay, thank you. So so for the corner, are we doing that right now? The 20,513? Or is that something new?
That's new. Raising her salary up to match the other.
Now it's under certification. Oh,
1.5 times of that, so that would come to what her pay is now. It's 25,130 plus half again.
wait a minute, half again, half the 25,130?
25,130 is the base, and then you take half that, so it's,
And add it back, add it in, so that
so
comes
what
up
is
to the.
that, 12,500, 12,600, something like that? So then you add that to the 25,130, so 37,700 or 8.
Okay,
And
That's where
now
we are
what
now.
this is proposed at, it would be 61,540.
and the 20,513 for certification board member licensed physician, that's just a bump because they're a physician by 20,500?
Yeah,
Correct.
that's, what was it, state ordinance that's like,
It's by state statute that
Statute.
if they are a licensed physician, they get half of their rate again, 1.5 times. If they are, if they perform, autopsies at no cost to the county, I believe it goes up double. So,
So the 20,513 is half of what? The 41, it's not half?
41,027.
or no? Okay, there must be some change in there or something, because that's 26, but,
Sliding scale.
uh-huh. But twice would be 26, not 7, but that's, okay. There's a dollar difference, but whatever. Okay.
So that, I don't think that was very clear. So for the corner, they get half more of what the salary is, correct?
Guess what the base pays?
That's what the base is. So the salary, 2021 base rate, 25,130, half more of that's 12,565, a total of 37,695.
That is what they would get paid, what they would be paid in 2021.
But they're making the sliding scale be 41,027, because that's twice,
That's proposed for next year.
right, right. Instead of, okay, 37 now, so, okay.
So that takes that total, so by the time you apply the 1.5, it takes it to 61,540.
Then, yeah, so the total of 41,027 is the sliding scale proposed for 2022. Then you add half of that again, the 20,513, which 50 cents, whatever, and then that's how you get their total of 61,540. So essentially, she's going, or they, or whoever, he, she, is going from 25,130 currently to 61,540.
Well, it'd be 37.6 or 37.7.
Well, for the 2022, we're doing this.
Right, but in 2021, that position pays, because it's a licensed physician, it pays 37.
Okay, gotcha. So that, but,
And
so then
the-
it's going from 37 to 61.
Right. The increase would be $23,845. We still pay for autopsies, correct?
Yes.
And I think some of the requests we've heard from the prosecutor's office before for trials was because of some of the fees from the coroner's office on courtroom testimony. And we're looking at increasing this by almost $24,000 salary. That's interesting. Any other thoughts or comments about the discussion with the coroner's office or the sliding scale or the certifications that are listed there? I think the certifications, as explained for the level 3s and then also for the clerk of being on the board, I think those are self-explanatory.
President Latterman?
Yes.
Yes, I would say that the sliding scale, we had to come up, we looked at the other counties, like the similar counties, and that's how that was the starting point for the sliding scale. So the sliding scale has a reference base when we work with the auditor's office and they provide us information of other counties. We didn't just come up with arbitrary numbers. We tried to find similar counties to apply that to. And that is, as you said, one of 3 options. There is a 4th option, do nothing always. That is an option. But if you look at the sliding scale, we had to find something, and the coroner's increase is substantial, but when you put it into the other counties for comparison, to get it into the same sliding scale, that's why there shows that factor. And we did, and I know there's some confusion on there, but we looked at the base scale. That's at 41,027, and to your point, it is a state statute of the 1.5 times.
Yeah, just looking at this, there's some hefty increases here for sure. And maybe those things, if you're looking, comparing apples to apples with other like-size counties, maybe it makes sense, but I don't know. I mean, from my standpoint, I'd rather see the employees getting the raises, the ones that are working for those elected officials, than the elected officials, quite honestly. I mean, I'm looking here, auditor's office is, auditor's 12,000, looks like the other, like assessor, clerk, recorder, surveyor, treasurer. You're talking $5,000 and $8,000 jumps. Looks like commissioners is 5,000. Looks like the council's 1,300. I mean, those things add up quick, obviously. But any other thoughts about the sliding scale?
Well, and from my understanding too, if there's something that, and let me know please if I'm wrong, but if there's something that stands out to the entire council, then you can make amendments, is that correct? To address different parts of it. So if that's something specific like the elected officials that people are not comfortable with, we can amend that part of it. Am I thinking correctly on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's
Okay.
always the latitude to make any amendments or changes that you would see fit, I presume.
I have one other question as far as like the chief deputies. Is that a state statute that they be 80%? Where does the 80%? Is that a county ordinance?
No,
That's a
just-
local.
A local county ordinance that they be 80%? So that they're tied to the elected official?
Correct.
Okay.
Was there anything else about the sliding scale? Or the elected officials' pay or anything else like that?
I'm sorry, just one more little clarification. That is an ordinance?
It's in our salary ordinance. It's something that was adopted by the county council,
Probably when you
I
did
don't know,
the study,
6
wasn't it?
years ago, maybe?
I think, didn't they put that in effect when they did the WIS thing?
So it'd been about 6 years ago.
Thanks.
Yes.
Reason for raising the elected official salaries is the lack of candidates running for office, and comparing our elected official salaries with comparable county sizes, it falls substantially below those other counties. I think, we had the hopes that we might attract some, no offense to anybody, and certainly I hold the ranks on this one, but the younger candidates to run for office, and hope that we might encourage younger folks to stay in the county and, get some more candidates seeking office. I think the last election was a pretty good example of that, so that was some of the thoughts behind it.
President Loudermilk,
Yes.
2 questions, and I'll start off with just the counties that were used for comparisons. If I can ask the budget board what those counties were that were used for comparisons, so that way we know.
We used the counties that were second-class city counties. For instance, Tippecanoe, Howard, Monroe, Delaware, et cetera.
I thought I had-
Bartholomew.
I had down, and maybe this was just a sliding scale, but in my notes, Madison, Boone, Monroe, Hamilton, and Howard. Were those the ones that we used? Okay.
So,
For one example, Monroe, we don't,
what,
the assessor could tell us we don't have the assessed valuation of the property to be able to match anything in Monroe County, to be able to generate the revenue that Monroe County can generate. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to I'm not putting you on the spot.
No.
I'm just saying that.
You're right.
If Councilman, or President Loudermilk, I believe I was told that we used the same criteria that did WIS. So we didn't create the pool, we just duplicated. Am I correct in that, Cheryl, that we used similar ones that WIS had used in their studies for comparison? So, I mean, I understand it's really easy to criticize what other people do, but when we try to come up with something, we try to come up with a fair and equitable method of coming up with a calculation. So if we used the WIS as a standard and we adopted that and it was implemented, and then we in turn tried to duplicate a sliding scale, we use the same counties. So if we're wrong, I'll take it. But if we use that same study, I mean, we have to have some reference basis. If the budget committee would remember, I think that's why we asked for a guidance, and that's how we found the guidance. Thank you.
Just Monroe just jumped out at me, and I'm thinking Bloomington and the assessed evaluation, and that county I just questioned that. Okay.
Well, Councilwoman Thies, what were those counties again, you said?
Oh, I just flipped that over. There we go.
I couldn't write fast enough.
Yeah.
Get my old glasses on. Madison, Boone, Monroe, Hamilton, Howard, and I believe possibly.
One more time.
Whoa,
One more time.
Slower.
Madison, Boone,
Boone, Howard,
Monroe,
Monroe, Howard.
Hamilton,
Uh-huh.
now Howard. There
Okay.
you go.
See, I lost some there.
Okay, and we thought Tippecanoe and Bartholomew might be as well. I was thinking because Bartholomew is Columbus, right? Yeah, so I was thinking it was two, but I had only written down the 5. This was just in my notes, so.
All right, thank
I
you.
had another sheet with all of them listed, and I can't find it because this book's huge.
Thanks.
So we just took those and averaged them up?
No, there were some that were significantly higher.
Okay. Yeah, there we go. Wait, I was gonna say.
And then one other question, President Loudermilk.
Sure.
As we're looking through this and we're looking at the sliding scale and the 3%, 3.5%, 4%, 5%, and things like that, I just want to bring up that we're now questioning WIS, Baker Tilly, handling it in-house. Councilman Thacker's example of using them as examples and stuff. It's been a while since we've done a study and we're talking about doing that study. And I would guess that more than likely that most positions in the county are going to be changed anyway. So if we're looking at a budget and we say that we're going to be, the largest section, like you said, was $4,191,880 over, and that's salaries. And then we go through next year or approve it before the end of the year, or the commissioners do, and we do a study and each of those divisions are increased, I think we need to consider that when we look at the overage and stuff, because that could directly affect our numbers for next year. So if everybody gets an increase of 5% in the budget, and then they turn around and WIS or Baker Tilly or in-house, however we do it, gets an increase also, my concern would be is that while we're depleting the general fund and getting rid of some of those numbers, it increases even farther, and then we get ourselves in a bad position. And I'm not saying that the employees don't deserve it. I'm just saying that we need to look at that and look at possible other options going for next year before we get that study done, unless that study can be done before the budget's adopted, and I don't think that's possible. I just don't want to see us 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years down the road in negative cash flow problems.
I don't disagree.
Didn't mean to make the room quiet. Sorry for making everything so quiet.
No, no. Any other thoughts or comments about elected officials sliding scale? Any of that before we move on? While we're kind of focused on this sheet, the same sheet, obviously these percent increases really don't have an impact on the part-time employees. And I think it's fair to say everybody's having a hard time getting people to work these days, and there's a lot of people who'd rather stay home, collect a check, we're seeing. Was there any thought about maybe trying to bump those up to be more competitive with other places that are having challenges to find workers? I mean, is there anything that we could do? Was there really any discussion about that?
Part-time?
Correction is, the increase was for part-time as well.
Right, but what I was saying is it's not really
Yes.
too meaningful.
Yeah, and on that, the one that jumps out at me is that we're 48 positions short on jailers.
Right.
And so what we did on that is, instead of giving some type of a signing bonus, in this budget, we created, we tried to help with the increase of the clothing allowance that also would affect the jailers. And also they came up with a stipend. I believe it's factored into this as well. That would help with to fill the positions that we're currently in litigation that we don't have filled. So that was the two of the methodologies that we used to try to help attract those positions. But those weren't part-time, those were full-time positions that were left vacant. But we did talk about it, but we did just try to increase it, but we didn't do any additional over the 5%.
And I think, I'm trying to remember what departments in particular, but I felt like some of the department heads had moved. I want to say, like, in particular, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like Parks had a hard time doing part-time, so they had shifted some of their resources around, and especially as they got more equipment, I think that's going to help them with their resources with the new lands and things that they had. So I think some department heads were trying to make some of those adjustments on their own, because those are tough positions to fill, but that's just, am I correct in thinking that?
Yeah,
Building inspection.
Building, yeah, that was one of the other
It's fourth
ones.
from the bottom line there, where the parks maintenance increased
Yeah, there
specialist numbers from 1950 from 820 to try to, instead of more people, they worked more hours, is what they did on that particular one. But as each of the, in the highway increased 4 seasonal part-time positions, but as each department came and we addressed all their needs, we then tried to summarize all of those at the end. And of course, we did the 2, 3s, and 4s, and then came back and attacked the salary.
So, I guess, maybe we're bouncing around a little bit here, but as we're talking about the sheriff's department, the stipends and things like that, how is the stipend for the jailer paid out? Is there a certain milestone they have to reach before they receive that $1,500, or what does that look like?
So we made a recommendation that they would do the stipend, and it would be paid out every 4 months, and you had to be present for that 4 months to be eligible for it. But we also were cognitive of from the auditors that we're here to do the financial, and we'll have a set plan. If they come to us and say it's better that we do it in a 6-month increment versus a 4-month increment, we are fine with that. But we were just trying to some way to incentivize filling the positions and maintain them. We want them to be, if it's spread out over 3 payouts over a 12-month period, we're going to use it for a retention as well as attraction. but if you're only there 2 months, you would not be eligible till the next payout. And so that's what we recommended, but we are just being the financial arm of it. We were willing to get feedback from the department heads and the payroll to make it more successful.
Was there anything thought of with dispatch?
We put a stipend in for the dispatchers as well.
What was that? I didn't see that.
Yeah.
It's 6 from the bottom, I believe, on that highlight sheet.
Oh, the same
It's
amount?
$1,500.
$1,500 for 26 dispatchers.
And we know that there's, other areas that have concern about, filling positions and so on. But in particular with those, whether it be, numbers for the jail or, it's a safety thing. We have to have dispatchers that are there that are consistent. And I think, obviously some of you have experienced that personally in what you do. So that's why we were looking at that. But I know it's hard because, there's other positions, that we want to look at too, but these were 2 that stood out to us as a safety. We wanted to address those.
And, jailers and dispatchers were the 2 that they particularly are having problems keeping people there. And so, we wanted to address it immediately.
I guess my concern is the dispatch a similar situation. Your recommendation was 4 months, and they talked about 6 as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, we were open enough to
They're going
say,
to do what they're going to do, obviously, but
if they came back, we thought we had to set some kind of a guideline, and we worked with auditors on that, but then if they came back as department heads and said, this works better for us, and it was still equal to the same amount of monetary value, we're not here to micromanage how it's to be effective, the most effective, but just to budget it for the financial was our thought on it. And that maybe dispatchers may work differently than the jailers, so we wanted to be able to allow the department heads. But when the department heads came and talked to us, they stressed to us the struggles that they were having. So that's why we tried to come up with some kind of a solution to work with them.
President Loudermilk.
yes. Councilman Norris?
Back to what I previously said when we were talking about WIS, Baker Tilly, and those things, looking at the 3, 4, and 5% increases and talking about stipends, is that something, depending on what we do with the budget and how we decide to move forward, is that something that we can do since we have an overage, as Mr. Bramble had said? Is that something that we can look at for all the employees of the county, rather than do some of the increases like it's listed into that 22 increase projection? That would take care of all departments instead of just certain departments or certain divisions, since we talked about struggles in the CARES Act and everything else. Maybe that's something that we should look at across the board to help everybody out as county employees. And rather than adopt something that costs more for the taxpayers prior to knowing what the study's going to show from WIS or Baker Tilly, that might be an option to still give employees a bump and help them out in times of struggle, still help the taxpayer and get to a position where we can do the study that we need to and address it for 2022 going into 2023.
What are you saying, what might be or what might be?
By giving a stipend to all employees of the county, rather than giving,
Don't raise their salary, just give them a stipend.
my concern is that WIS is gonna come back, or Baker Tilly, or whoever it may be, that it's gonna come back and say you need to increase everybody X number of dollars. So we give them a 5%, the study comes back and says you give them another 5, so now you've given them 10. The county runs out of money where we have an overage, as Mr. Bramble stated. So instead of giving them something that creates a negative later on for the county, we give them something now with the overage that we have to get that fund down in numbers, and then turn around, do the study, and do the adjustment as needed from whether it's internal or it's Baker Tilly or WIS. I'm just throwing out a thought.
Right. I think we have, I think the goal, I think we're talking about a couple different things here. I think the goal of the stipend, if I understand it correctly from the budget committee, was to try to, I guess, attract and retain dispatchers and jailers, which is, they're both very challenging fields for sure. I mean, they're not very desirable, quite frankly. And I was just talking to one recently, and he told me about individuals being hired and quitting after 1 and 2 shifts. So I mean, you can look at it a couple different ways. I mean, I see that the budget committee's trying to make efforts here, I mean, through a stipend system, and maybe 6 months is too long for some of these people. The time horizon's too long for them. They think, well, heck, 6 months in this place, that's an eternity. And I think the challenge is getting people in the door even. I mean, you're getting more bad guys in the door than good guys. So, I mean, they're really hamstrung right now. But I think you can look at it from the stipend perspective with the jail and dispatch specifically. You know, these are different types of positions, obviously. But I don't know if the stipend would necessarily get them to where they need to be. I'm wondering if it's, you know, some of the feedback I'm getting from jailers is that it's a stressful job and you have to work harder there than you do at a state prison. You make more money on the hour. And I think a lot of people look at the immediate versus long-term, whether that's 4 months, 6 months, or a payout in November. So I think that's part of a challenge, especially when in the jail, I think for the most part, you're getting a younger demographic in there, and they want, generally speaking, I want it now, right? So I think that could be part of the challenge. So there's that. With the other part that you were talking about, if I'm understanding you correctly, I think maybe you have some concerns about the future impact of the percent increase. You know, we can see what these things look like per classification from 3, 4 to 5%, and you're talking, for example, comment A from 4 to 5%, you're talking 17 cents on the hour. But what does that look like countywide, and what are the ramifications of any? There's going to be some classification study and compensation study then. There's something that's going to change, and I think you would presume that turns into increases for employees. You know, at the very least, they would stay the same, because for one, I assume the rest of the council is the same. If somebody came back and said someone should receive a lower rate of pay, I don't think there's anybody here that's going to support that, taken away from anybody. So I think we have to presume that things are probably going to increase, and what that looks like, who knows at this point. I mean, you talk about stipends. I mean, you could do a number of things. I mean, you go with the 5% as proposed, go with a 5% and some type of pay incentive for employees, or you could go down to, I mean, you're looking at different things here, $1,500 for the jailers and dispatchers, for example. There's some changes in clothing allowance, recommendations, things like that. I mean, in theory, you could, you could do something at either the 5%, or if there was a feeling that that was too much with the uncertainty of what's happening moving forward, you could pick a different percent, what that looks like. I mean, I think you're free to do whatever you want. I mean, you can't exceed the 5%, certainly, because that's what it's been advertised at. I don't think that we have any room to go up. But you could pick a 4, 4.5, a 3.5 you have here before you, a 3, and then you could tack on a $1,000 bonus or a $1,200 bonus or whatever that might look like, a $1,500 bonus. I mean, you have a variety of things you could do, but you have to have those numbers in hand to be able to make an intelligent decision. I don't know, I mean, as we sit here, who knows what's going to come of that employee study? As I said, I presume things are going to go up, because we should have had a salary analysis done a few years ago, quite frankly. So we had to presume those things are going to go up. Those external and external points, I would assume they're all going to increase, and they should. So, salaries are the things that they give year after year, right? It's not like buying a truck or a car for EMA. It keeps giving, so you have to keep paying into it. So, for me, I would prefer maybe not quite the 5% and give the employees a bonus, whether it's out of, I mean, the council still has $500,000 in our budget that we could use for it. Well, not quite $500,000. What was it, 32,000 or something, shy of that now? Whatever that was for the unemployment, but we have money there where we could, in theory, you could give a bonus this year, maybe next month to people of $1,000 or $1,200, $1,250, $1,500, whatever that looks like. But I think you would have to see what the numbers look like for these percentages, base rate percentages, what that obligation is from the county, and what that would look like with a bonus. I mean, I think for me, talking about this increase here from comma A from 1809 to 1826 an hour, I mean, if an employee's making $35,000 a year, for example, which is probably what a lot of the county employees make, that 1% is $350, which once it's taxed and it's realized over a year, they really don't see a huge impact, unfortunately. But if you did something, say, for example, if you did a 4% with a $1,000 bonus that you could get to them this year.
That gets taxed.
It's going to get taxed about 30% probably, 28, 30%. But it's still something they could get now and have this year. So, I mean, it's just something to think
But not
about.
next year.
What you're saying, though, is that it's, we still have, we have some wiggle room that we can make some adjustments. We can, as long as it doesn't exceed the total amount in here, we could go, like you said, the 4% and $1,000, or 3% and $1,500, or we can wiggle it around that way?
Well, I think if with any bonus that you would do, it would have to be outside of
Oh,
this
that's what
budget, right? Outside of this 2022 budget.
With the CARES money, could that
No,
qualify
no.
for that?
No.
You can give bonuses to public safety workers who were on the job during the crisis. And,
That's
yeah,
not very many.
if,
You can't use CARES for money for salary?
I'm talking about the ARP.
No, I was asking about CARES.
CARES, yeah, you could
We could use
potentially.
for salaries, but then would a bonus be considered in the salary
They-
range? Because it's gonna be taxed and everything like,
Yeah, you transfer money to an employee's salary, no matter what you call it.
okay,
For all employees?
With-
for all employees, the
Yeah.
CARES Act, so, but not the ARP.
Mr. President, can I make a
Yes,
statement?
Councilman Thies.
And I guess I'm going a little personal here. So, my main concern is I want to make sure we still have a percentage increase. Educators have received stipends. I love my job, I love what I do, but I also know the reflection of, and the thoughts when we haven't in the past received increases, but we just received stipends. Stipends are nice, you get the money right away, but when it comes to eventually, retirement, things like that, it's hard, especially when you're really dedicated to what you do. So I just want to make sure if we do consider something like that, that we absolutely still look at some sort of percentage increase, because, it's tough. I mean, we've talked about, prices going up. When I hear, someone's, making in a certain range salary, it's hard, especially if they've got a family on, 30,000 or whatever they're working with. So having been in a profession, I get it, because we do have some positions, I look at healthcare even too, where you have stipends, where you have things to try to retain, try to draw people. And it's nice to have, but it can't be the end-all be-all for that. So I just want to make sure if we are considering that, that we don't go down that path of not having percentage increases.
Well, I think that if we, I'm sorry, can I
Yeah,
speak?
Councilman Wilson.
I totally agree that it shouldn't just be a stipend. I think we should still increase, but the study for the compensation plan is gonna take several months. It's gonna go into, the majority of next year to even get it accomplished. I'm thinking, I agree with a, bonus, stipend, whatever you wanna call it, in addition to a, percentage increase over time, over the next year, less probably than the 5% to allow for a whatever amount, maybe a couple of times next year. That way, it's kind of we care about our employees and we want you to not have to suffer through while we go through this compensation reevaluation again. And it kind of is a get you by sort of thing. But yet still a pay increase.
Mr. President?
And use the money from CARES to pay for those bonuses.
Mr. President?
Councilman Wager.
I think maybe we're overreacting about worrying about a 5% increase. Having that operating balance overpaid in there, caused a reaction, I think, that made people worry that we didn't have money. We had money. We had too much money in the operating balance. And taking that out of there did not cause any problems at all. We have plenty of money to pay a 5% pay increase. And while all this, whatever reevaluation is going on, it's going to take a year. That's when we can pay a 5% pay increase to our employees. And then next year, when whoever makes the recommendation for the reevaluation, they can get their pay increase, and if it's 2% or 1% or 3% or whatever it is, that new increase can be paid. And in the meantime, while gas is $3.59, like it was, I saw tonight on the way here, and hamburgers $5.99, we'll have our 5% pay increase starting in January of 2022, and everybody won't starve to death. This is the time for us to make the pay increase because we have the money. Mr. Auditor, do we have the money and we can afford it? Do you think we do?
You do.
He's a former auditor for the State Board of Accounts. He's a certified public accountant. He has credentials, and he knows probably better than anybody in this room accounting, and he knows what he's talking about. I trust him. I believe him. I think he knows what he's talking about, and I think 5% is what we should pay our employees for a pay increase this year.
President Loudermilk.
Councilman Norris?
I think, I'm not saying not doing any increases. I mean, I think you're right, 3, 4, 5, 3.5, whatever that percentage is. And with Mr. Bramble saying that we have an overage, I think the proper thing to look at is not only doing a percentage of increase, but also looking at whether you call it a stipend or you call it a bonus, and depending on how much we think we have, that we want to get down on numbers and using CARES Act funds and stuff like that. I think putting it out there and doing a payment yet this year and then 1 or 2 next year would be taking care of our employees. And I know that Councilwoman Wager over here shaking her head, but we're still taking care of our employees and giving them the overage and monies that we have and taking care of them while still giving them an increase in pay for 2022 with the idea that once we get done with the classification study, that there'll be most likely another increase. And even if there's not an increase, if it's suggested as a decrease, like you stated, there isn't a single person that's up here that's going to say we're going to decrease anything. So everybody across the board would get an increase. Everybody across the board would get a stipend, a bonus, whatever you want to call it, to help them out during the times when they're struggling. And you do it in 3 payments of whatever that dollar figure is, one yet this year, one next year at the end of April, March, whatever you want to call it, and one sometime next year toward the middle of the year to the end of the year. Thus giving the employees a little bit of money prior to Christmas, a little bit of money towards summer for vacations or whatever they want to use it for, and then again toward the end of year when it's back to school, if that's what you want to say it's going to. So taking care of the employees above and beyond, not only giving them an increase, but also using up those CARES funds that we have that are extra funds sitting out there and giving it to them. That's my thought of how to spend the money and how to go about it and still take care of everybody.
Mr. President, let me just say that, CARES money can be spent for a lot of things. When you give people a raise, that goes into their paycheck year-round, and next year they'll have a higher paycheck, and when you get a raise, then you got a higher paycheck with a raise on it. A stipend is a way not to give somebody a raise. That gives them a little bit of pay, and next year you don't know if you get a raise. It's a little bit of a boss's trick to give you a stipend and not give you a raise. And it's exactly what Councilwoman Thies says, it doesn't give you security, it just gives you a little bit of money right now. We need to have a raise, we need to take care of people. We had so many years that we didn't get a raise. That's why our pay is down in Vigo County.
Well, I think
That's
that's
not
why
what-
we're going to do a study, and
That's not
I didn't
right.
say no
Yeah,
raises. I
that's
said
right.
go with one of the raises
Well, we
and
got
add
the-
into
and-
it an increase.
And I have the floor, So if we give them a 5% now, and we'll do the study, and while we're doing the study, we got all next year, and they're getting their 5%, and then we can act on the study and pay them whatever we learn from the study that we can pay them. And that's a reasonable thing to do. That's reasonable. And that will be fairly treating our employees. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Mr. President, I think
Councilman
that-
Wilson?
I don't believe that Travis was saying not to give them a raise. I think it wasn't an either-or, it was a both. And it was a give them a raise and a bonus. And the bonus is kind of a tied over, we know, we hear you, we're doing this evaluation. Please be patient with us while we're doing that, and here, is a little extra money to get you by during that. But it also, is in addition to a pay raise. It's not either or.
And try not to start dead.
What if we gave a 5% and a bonus?
That'd be real good. I'd be for
Okay.
that.
I mean, that's a possibility.
Okay, I'd call for a
President
vote on
Loudermilk?
that. That'd be real good. I'd really
Councilman Thacker?
like that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with all these. They're really good ideas that we should have had 3 weeks ago. when we were working on the budget, and we had done our 2, 3s, and 4s, and I reported at the last council meeting when I impromptu was asked how things were going on the budget, and I said we've heard from all the departments. We have now set what we believe to be the 2, 3s, and 4s. We're getting ready to do salaries. If anybody at that time had some out-of-the-box type of suggestions, which I love all these ideas, I do, but when we look at here, where we last year had a budget of $71,032,398, and we're coming in now at $71,508,753. $508,753. So $485,000 over. If we take away 1% or 1.5%, and we try to give them $1,000, the math doesn't work out. So we have to go back to a point where we use Calissa and the auditor's department, and we put all this up on the screen, and we start massaging all these numbers again. I mean, that's fine. We can do that. I don't know that we can do it tonight, but I will make myself available this week if anybody else wants to be, and we'll work out whatever you guys want to. I'm willing to do that, but what I don't think that we can go back and digress to the point that we can move this around. And I think the summary, even though I heard a comment that we tried to get it ready before on the 27th, and I think it was emailed out, but then we had to go back and adjust operating levels. So, if we're wanting to redo it all, and we haven't talked about it yet, but when we did the 2, 3s, and 4s, we had to go back and cut. We had to make a bunch of cuts to even get it within, it was in the levy. Is that not correct? That we had to make cuts on, from one of the sheriff. We had to make a cut on the prosecutors. We made a cut on the audit. So, I mean, we made a bunch of cuts to try to get it back to a budget that was suitable. And I know Brenda was there and saw us go through these, and we had to cut some vehicles. So if we want to go back to that, as I know Marie said that she put that out, as if anybody has any questions a week ago when we had this out, let us know and we'll try to answer any of those questions. So, I mean, I hope nobody feels like this was sprung on them tonight, but when we proposed this, we tried to factor in all those. And as I said earlier, there is an option to do nothing. I hope that's not what we do. And I agree with you on the fact is we want to give them something, either if it's a percentage and a bonus, that's great. But I just don't know, I can't tell you right now by looking at it, if you take away 1%, and you said on some of those common A's, that may only be a few cents an hour. But if you give them $1,000, it's not going to balance out on the budget. So I'm just trying to look at the total budget. So that was my comment on, I'm willing to put the work in and volunteer my time to do whatever, but I didn't know the direction that we wanted to do a bonus. Had I known a bonus was in there, we would have had an option, because they were very accommodating every time we had ideas and suggestions to show that to us. So, I mean, that's my concern on it at this stage of the game. Thank you.
It might have just been after looking over it that the idea came. So it might, I mean, it's not like it was anything, but, and
I didn't know to make that an option.
And if it's even, I mean, if it's possible to use the CARES money for the bonus, then it doesn't really change any of these numbers, is that right?
Did you have something, Kevin?
I didn't know.
Sure.
Kevin in the County Assessor's Office. My question is, Mr. Thacker, you had just said the budget numbers, the 71 odd million. And compared from this year to last year, it was, I think, $400,000. Is that everything? Because I also know, Aaron, when you were saying the numbers, you said that we're $5 million over the projected revenues. So if that's true, were we $5 million over projected revenues last year?
That's one.
Because if we're looking at only a $400 and some thousand dollar
$71
difference,
million, we're looking at the total county budget from all sources, all funds.
that's the 71 million.
Yeah, and what we're talking about, I think what was it, 3 million or whatever?
Roughly $5 million shortage.
We're talking about in levy fund.
But that's all included in the 71 million, right? So if it was included in the 71 million last year, then we were roughly $4.5 million shortage. That's my only question. I mean, I'm sitting back there listening to all this, and I'm thinking we're still only talking of about $400,000 difference. No matter how you look at it, that's what we're talking about. Which is still a lot of money. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying I don't think we should be focusing on the 5 million shortage, because it looks like we've always had that. You should be focusing on the 400 and some thousand difference. Sorry, I just trying to understand.
I do. Mr. Bramble, how much do we have in the CARES Act fund?
I think right now it's probably about $2 billion in that appropriation. It's in the general fund, and we have a existing appropriation that's been used for CARES Act, COVID expenses, and I think the last time I looked, there was around $2 million left. And then on this, we've got a request in there for next month to use, what was it, 129,000 of that to cover payroll that we've already spent from health department.
But it's already spent, so it wouldn't change your cash balance.
And,
Yeah.
well, it's an appropriation to cover what we anticipate for the rest of the year
Yeah.
too.
President Loudermilk,
Yes.
hopefully final part of my discussion. I think when it comes down to what we've discussed over the last couple meetings and stuff like that, where we had the clerk's department in here, and we're talking about jailers, we're talking about retaining employees and how we lose those employees. I guess my thought when I suggested that, and that Brenda brought up the CARES Act, was that that would help retain those people while we're waiting to make adjustments. And I'm not saying not to give percentages of increases across the board. I'm just thinking if we have that money that we can use that for, to put it out there to retain those employees across the board, to give everybody a bump, not only just because, but also to retain them in their positions, so that way maybe, you know, the clerk's department feels a little bit better, jailers, things like that. So that was just my thought process when I brought that up, was if we could use that, if we could do that for the employees and use those CARES funds, that would be a great thing across the board.
Excuse me, one other point with that. The percentage increase doesn't also, I mean, like the people that make the least amount, that percentage is a very minimal bump for them. If we give them $1,000, that would it would have more impact, I think, on somebody that's making a little bit less to get $1,000 bonus or whatever, rather than, I mean, if they're making less, if they're making $25,000, say 1% of that was what, $250? A 3% is $750 over the year, spread out over the year. 5% would be what, 1,025, which is $100 is that $100 a month, I guess? But you give them $1,000 a couple times next year, say, or $500, that means more to them, because it's in essence, it's a higher percentage. If that makes any sense at all. I'm trying to think that through as I'm talking, but it would make more sense to help all the employees to do the percentage and a bonus, especially the people that make less. They're on the lower end of the salary scale. I mean, the bonus would be a lot more to them. makes sense.
Anything else before we move on? Okay. Moving on. Ordinances relating to appropriations. Additional appropriation 2021-25, ROC 2021-43, prosecutor trials and investigations. Robert E. Roberts is here.
Good evening. As I've said many times, I'm glad I don't have your jobs. I know some of you may have said that about mine, but I will reiterate it one more time tonight. You see the request that we put in front of you. I just wanted to get this done before the end of the year because I know with the budgets and we hit October, we hit November, and then December really isn't an option. Unfortunately, I don't have good solid numbers for how this is all going to play out. And even as recent as today, I checked to see the status of our special prosecutor request on the criminal case that's impacting these numbers that I've presented, and there's still not been a special prosecutor appointed in the case. So for whatever reason, the person that was originally selected by the court declined that, and so I'm not sure what the court's intention is at this point. But what I have presented here is enough to pay the bills as they've been presented to us, to the forensic pathologist, that one that does our autopsies that you were discussing earlier. I'm confident that once we get over the conflict of interest situation that we have, we're going to be able to work together. He's approached me on multiple different occasions and said, hey, I want to talk to you about this. We're just kind of at a standstill. So I know he's willing to work with those fees. These are the first 2 times that we've had to use him where he's sent us a bill. And I'm sure these bills are more in conjunction with what he would charge for a civil personal injury, wrongful death type of case as opposed to working with our county. So I have no doubt that that's going to come down. I've asked for enough to make sure that we can cover those bills because we would like to get them paid at some point this year. And I think we're going to be able to do that. I will just make the same promise that I have always made. If additional monies are allocated to this line item, we will not move to transfer them to another line item. We will only use them for the items that come out of this line item for our trials and our investigations. We do still have the quite likely, high likelihood of having a couple of more major trials before the end of this year. I know we've got at least one serious armed robbery trial, and we've got a couple of other murder trials still scheduled. Whether or not they'll make it to that high priority of actually going, I can't say that they will or they won't, but it's very likely because we had so many cases that have been dragging on because of the courthouse and the courtroom closures for the many months that we had. So as you can see, we're requesting $10,000 additional in trials and investigations. And these expenses for trials and investigations include certain things like depositions and paying the court reporters for the depositions. So it involves transportation of witnesses. If we have witnesses from outside of the area where we have to bring them back to testify, put them in a hotel, those sorts of things. We try to do that as economically as we possibly can, but again, we can't predict it. We've used a lot of money this year because we've had so many trials, and so we're asking for an additional $10,000 for that, and then enough to cover these 2 bills with the forensic pathologist. Guess I can take this mask off, make it a little easier.
Any questions or comments from council? No questions?
The 10 to the 6,700, and then 10,000 is the 26,9, and there's 30,000 allocated or appropriated already? Is that what you're saying?
30,000 was our initial appropriation for the year, that's correct.
Okay.
All right, I don't think there's anything else from council.
I will, if I may, just make one other comment. I want to say thank you to the Budget Committee and ultimately to all of you. A few years ago, when we made some staffing changes within the office, one of the things that we did was we took a deputy prosecutor based on the criminal justice study and some other things and assigned that deputy prosecutor just to our specialty courts, the drug court, Veterans Treatment Court, and the adult mental health court. One of the tasks that Terry and I assigned to her earlier this year was get a juvenile drug court up and running. She has worked with Judge Kelly and Chief Probation Officer Deb Kessler. They have all worked very hard, very diligently this year to make that something that can become a reality. And from what I heard earlier, from what Vicki said, that is something that's being added into the budget. It's a program that's needed. Those of you that have worked in law enforcement, you've seen many graduates from the juvenile courts up into the adult courts. And so certainly we want to take an opportunity when we can to put in place some programs and some opportunities to maybe break that cycle. And I think this is a great opportunity to do that. So I thank you for your consideration on that as well.
You may want to hold your thanks until we pass it.
I thank you for your consideration, not for the dollar signs yet. So.
I was on the Budget Committee, I'm for it, but I'm just saying it has to pass.
I understand. As I said, I don't want that job. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Next, we have resolution of reallocation of existing appropriation 2021-16, ROC 2021-44, Vigo County Auditor.
Good evening. This just falls under us asking for the request because we're the ones that manage the accounting of the books. So when you did the additional appropriation for the coronavirus this year, we put it in a 3 series due to the fact that it was just for coronavirus expenses. We didn't know how much would have to be used for the health department for overtime at that point. At the beginning of this year, when they started still having overtime based to COVID reasons, we were instructed to go ahead and pay it out of this line item. So this is just to clear that up, those line items up for State Board of Accounts. We did put in, we hope, enough to average out through the rest of the year, working with the health department, but I can't guarantee and may have to take care of that then next year, or a different way. So this is just an out-of-series transfer to carry, or to take care of the lines to clear those up, to get us through the remainder of the year. And you have $2,108,599.08 left in your appropriations, if you want the exact number.
Say it again, please.
$2,108,599.08.
Okay, thanks.
Any questions from council? All right, thank you. Next up, salary ordinance 2021-15, ROC 2021-45, Vigo County Sheriff.
Good evening, Council. Derek Fell, Vigo County Sheriff's Office. Just make sure we're on the same page. This is for the supervisor stipend reallocation that we've requested. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. The request we're making is basically to restructure our current supervisor rank structure. Historically, the Sheriff's Office, when I say historically, 12, 15 years ago, and before that, we had lieutenants and sergeants in our chain of command outside of the sheriff and chiefs or administrative positions. The previous administration put in first sergeants, and technically first sergeants are to be over sergeants. And our administration, Sheriff Glass's administration, believes that we need to go back to the lieutenants and sergeants simply because, or I should say primarily because, we don't have, 40, 50, 60, 80, 100 sergeants to manage. We're not a department of that size. So we basically, our goal is to, through attrition, we lose our first sergeants, but we replace them with sergeants. So those of you may not understand, sergeant's the lowest level rank, then a first sergeant, then a lieutenant, then your administrative personnel. We want to take out the first sergeants. We just don't feel that there's a need for them in our chain of command. And the request that we're making actually saves the council $1,000 So we're not asking for an increase in financial, from a financial aspect there, just a restructuring. It's already been approved by our merit board. The people have already been placed in those ranking positions, but we do have to change the salary ordinance to reflect those changes.
Any questions or comments from council?
Yes, and I had a question on that. I understand that's the initial. What is the, do you have a 2-5-year plan? What will be the officers and a number of them going forward? I understand this would be what the reallocation would be initially, but I mean, if we end up having more lieutenants instead of first sergeants, or, that, I just wanted to see what the projected outlook looked like.
So we have no intentions, and I can't speak on behalf of what an administration in the future may come before you
Right.
request, but Sheriff Plasty's administration has no intentions of adding lieutenants. We've actually subtracted lieutenants. I
Right.
think we had 7 5 years ago, and we're I think 5 now.
Looking to go
We're
forward.
looking to be at 5, yeah. So we do not want to increase lieutenants at all. We don't have any intentions of increasing any of the other positions. We actually intend to lose the remaining. Right now, currently, we have 2 first sergeants. I don't want to be too complicated here. We're appropriated for 4.
Yes.
But we only have 2 people in that position. So the council's hasn't been paying for those supervisor positions for some period of time now. One of them, I think, has been over a year that the stipend's been sitting there because we didn't replace it with a first sergeant's position. So no intentions of adding additional lieutenants, and we're actually planning to lose the remaining 2 first sergeants and take those to 0.
And what time frame is the attrition?
Can't say, because those people are still in existence with us. They both have on approximately 20 years. So whether they retire at 20 years or stay till 32 years, I can't say.
It's not, there's not an average when they typically retire, is not.
I couldn't sit here before you today and give you a precise number, but just my experience in the 20 years I've been at the sheriff's office, generally speaking, people leave between about the 25 and 32 year mark.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Any other questions or thoughts from council?
Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, resolution of reallocation of existing appropriation 2021-17 ROC 2021-46 Vigo County Council. What this is a transfer from payroll adjustments to professional services to cover whatever employee classification and compensation plan we decide to go with moving forward. So that is what that's for, just a transfer from one to the other. So when the time comes to make that decision, those funds are in place.
So to clarify, this is just to move the funds. Will there be a separate vote on determining what organization we use for it, or how that?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
The only question I might have is, I understood when we looked at the professional services that were before, it was around 63,000. What was the methodology to come up with 100,000 on the appropriation?
I know that at one point we had talked, there was discussion about maybe a third vendor to pursue, and it was just essentially to transfer the money available, so it was readily available depending on which firm or which vendor was used. Again, when this is up for vote next week, there's no decision that would be reached regarding who that vendor would be. This is just a transfer from one fund to the other. Any other questions, comments? Anything else? All right, for the good of the order, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion on the floor by Councilman Wager. I'm sorry, Councilman Wilson. Sorry. Second by who?
Thacker.
Councilman Thacker? Yes, Todd Thacker. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Be adjourned.